Okay, welcome to my tutorial of a knot on toned paper. So you might want to screenshot that image. I'm going to be using General's charcoals, most definitely my favorite brand, and I'm working on Strathmore toned paper. So I've pulled out my white charcoal pencil and a ruler. And I'm just going to lightly mark the ground where I want my knot to sit. I'm going to lightly pencil in the center of the knot and the sides. It's going to look a little like a bow tie or a piece of candy. But it's going to lay out where I want things to sit generally. The next thing I'm going to do is to break up the image of that knot into geometric shapes. So I like to do that with circles or triangles, squares, rectangles, parallelograms. I'm looking at my source image and I'm trying to see geometric shapes. I can use my pencil to put up against my source image to match an angle, then I lock my wrist. I can also use my charcoal pencil as a measuring tool. So if I have my source image on a large screen or photocopied and it's a similar size to the actual image that I'm drawing, that's going to work really well. If not, I can simply use the tool for source angles. It's not really going to work so well for measurements. So I'm going to use my charcoals, my General's charcoal to lay in some of the darkest darks. I'm just going to put those in. That's going to help me orient myself as I start the drawing. So I have my geometric shapes, and then I will also have the darkest darks laid in. Now I'm going to grab my white General's charcoal pencil. I'm going to work my way around my contour lines, watching to make sure that the pieces of fabric that are overlapping have the little bumps, that my contour lines are a little more organic. And I am paying close attention to my source image. And again, I can further break up those geometric shapes into other shapes and forms. All right, next step is to start blocking in my darks. I have a scrap sheet of paper to my right and a charcoal brick. I'm going to lay down a little bit of charcoal on that scrap sheet of paper. And then I'm going to use my fingers to pick up the charcoal. In this case, I'll be using my pinky. Oops. I guess I'm going to get rid of some feeder lines first. Not the worst idea to do that, because they do tend to get in the way once you start adding your values. So I just have a very inexpensive white eraser. Now I'm going to my darks. And I'm using my pinky because that is the smallest tool that I naturally have with me. So I'm putting in the darkest darks and blending those out. And I'm going to add my dark values. I'm going to try always to move my fingers along with the form of the fabric. And I will just be filling that in on the right side, in the center, and on the left. Right here, I'm just putting in the cast shadow. Now I have my contour lines drawn. They're quite bright, and I have my darkest darks put in pretty loosely, a little bit out of focus. I'm going to grab one of my charcoal pencils now and start refocusing, so sharpening some of those lines and refocusing some of those really, really dark areas. You'll notice the contour line that I'm putting on with these charcoal pencils is not consistently dark. I'm again always looking to my source image and back. At this point, I'm using a soft 6B because I'm going to want to go and blend these dark areas out again. All right, so that's a paper stomp. And I can also use a Q-tip. There's all sorts of tools that you can use in order to blend out those values. Your finger would work as well. So after that back and forth with the charcoal pencil and the Q-tip, I'm going to grab an eraser. And now I've sharpened just a straight up regular white eraser with a scalpel. I like to cut it and then slice it on a 45-degree angle. That just gives me a little bit more control. I end up with all sorts of little pieces, but it allows me to have or to get a significant amount of detail when I'm cutting in my highlighted areas. So that eraser is going to be used now to remove any dark or medium values that have inadvertently gotten in areas where I do not want them. Picking up that charcoal pencil, going back to the eraser, it really is a back and forth now to try and define my lights, my darks, and my lines. You'll notice I'm moving that eraser along the curve of the fabric. Any tool that you're using, it's really important that you make your marks or remove your marks in the same direction, in the same form, along the same curve as the object, because that will only help to create that illusion of form and depth. At this point now, I'm grabbing a charcoal brick of white charcoal. It's Generals. I also have on hand whiteboard chalk, just I guess I should say chalkboard chalk. But with this Generals brick of white charcoal, I'm going to put in my brightest highlights. You'll notice again that I'm making sure to angle those marks in the direction of the form of the object. Now at this point, I can use a cotton ball, a Q-tip, a paper stomp, or simply my finger, maybe a balled up piece of Kleenex. And I'm just going to blend down some of those harsher, bright lines. A Q-tip can be really good for getting into some of those smaller areas, just blend out those darks and blend in those lights and really create some of those necessary midtones. You'll notice I'm rotating the Q-tip and flipping it end to end depending on whether or not I'm working on darks or lights or midtones. So some of those white lines that I use to draw my contours are a little bit too bright for me. I'm going to take a sharp eraser and just tone them down a little bit. And the next step is to make those really bright whites, those highlights pop. So I'm going to go back and forth now with the white charcoal pencil to make my highlights pull forward and my shadows fall back. the last thing I'm going to do is just add the fringes on the edges. So the fabric was cut and a little bit frayed. So the first thing I'm going to do is pick up some mid-tone. I'm going to use a Q-tip for that, and I'm just going to add the edges of that piece of fabric. And right there, that's a cast shadow of some of the strings. Up at the top again, some frayed edges. And then on the inside of this one, there are some more frayed edges too. So once I've gotten the gray or the mid-tones down, I'm going to use a really sharp eraser and cut back into those so that they focus and I can see those lines. So the dark is actually the shadowing in between the fibers. And then of course the last step is going to be to bring that back into focus. I'm going to do that with my Sharp HB. Put some of those shadows in. Wherever the light is not catching those fibers, the fibers actually appear dark. And then of course, so do the spaces between those little, the little thread fibers. So it's back and forth between a sharp HB, which will be a light, crisp line, and the white charcoal pencil to add the actual threads in. Using a Q-tip now, I'm pushing back anything that's standing out too much and just finessing out the highlights and the shadows and putting some finishing touches on. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I wish you all the luck in the world on your knot drawing. Take care. Bye-bye.